breaking news alert.
Good afternoon. I'm Justin Mormith. We're going to break into programming now to take you to the nation's capital. Senators Lindsey Graham and Tom Tillis speaking about a possible government shutdown and the impacts on federal disaster relief. Let's take a listen.
That we do not miss the opportunity to deliver on before we leave town, and that is providing disaster relief for not only North Carolina, which bore the brunt of the storm damage in Helene, but storm damage from Milton, storm damage from Debbie, and storm damage from storms that happened years ago. That's what's a part of the more than $100 billion that was in what we thought was the agreed continuing resolution with the disaster supplemental attached to it. Now we know that that has fallen apart, and in some cases, I think for good reason. But at the end of the day, the people of North Carolina, the people of South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, the list goes on, Tennessee, need relief today. Because everyone needs to understand we're talking about a possible government shutdown here in Washington. Well, there are parts of this country that have been affected by the storm who are effectively shut down. And until we fund them, they have no hope. What I have in front of me right here, this stack of paper, these are the correspondence that I've received in my office since the storm. So I've tried to decide if I have to filibuster and do whatever I have to do to keep us from going home if we reach agreement that doesn't include the disaster supplemental. You're going to hear these stories on the Senate floor for as long as my voice and my colleagues' voice can be heard. So I agree with President Trump that we could do better than the CR that was before us, and I also agree with President Trump because he reaffirmed to me yesterday that he believes that disaster relief is absolutely essential before we go home. So I'm just saying to my colleagues, don't forget the people who have been affected by these storms. Their future is literally in your hands. Now I'll turn it over to Senator Graham. If you don't mind, I'll just keep it there.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, thank you, Senator Tillis. And I've got an equal stack like this. We've been out there countless times. We've seen the need. Look, there's a tremendous amount that is up in the air right now, and I don't want to get into hypotheticals and different scenarios, but I want to make a couple things clear. The fact that Western North Carolina has had to wait for 83 days is just ridiculous, and it's a disgrace. We've got people freezing in tents. We've got delayed FEMA trailers, but it's time to get beyond these political games. You know, the initial CR, which is now dead, it was a mess. It was a 1,500-page insult to taxpayers. And I just want to make sure that people know for anything to pass, it has to have disaster aid for Western North Carolina to get my support. I appreciate Senator Tillis being in lockstep on this, as well as those who were affected, also from South Carolina and other states. I've had colleagues from both sides of the aisle that have been in disaster states and understand the need, the federal component of this, come to me and say, what North Carolina needs, just let me know, because I'm behind you. So it's not just me, it's not just us up here, it's lots of other colleagues as well. We need this and we need it now.
So I talked to Governor McMaster. This thing's taller than I am, which is yeah, no, that's all right. Bad news is I'm not that tall. So the bottom line is, I just talked to Governor McMaster. This is essential to South Carolina. Helena, Hugo is legendary in my state. It hit Charleston years ago. The cost of South Carolina, even adjusted for inflation, is twice what Hugo was. More in deaths, more in money. The last 3 hurricanes we've had in South Carolina, the FEMA request combined are less than this hurricane. I cannot tell you the level of destruction that's hit South Carolina in the most odd way. It's not along the coast. It's where I live, up in the northwestern corner of the state. It came to Augusta, North Augusta, went right up the Savannah River and wiped out Asheville. And everything sort of to the left of Beaufort to Charlotte, that line just flattened. I've never seen anything like it. So people ask me, what's going to happen? Here's what's going to happen. You're going to get the help you need now, not later. President Trump has committed to making sure that the disaster relief component is part of any deal to fund the government. I agree that CR had things in it it should not, but disaster relief is an absolute must to get my vote and my support. I cannot go home, and I will not go home. I'll be reading letters with these guys until we make sure that the farmers who've lost everything, the families who've lost generations, not just one part of the family, entire families have been wiped out, that they know help is on the way. So how does this move in? People say you should pay for the disaster package. We haven't in the past, but now's not the time to bring that up. We've had months to talk about that, weeks to talk about that. Border security, taxes, we're going to pay for all that. But if this is not an emergency under federal law, what would be? If this doesn't qualify as an emergency, nothing will ever qualify for emergency. So to my Republican colleagues, we're going to pay for border security, we're going to pay for rebuilding our military, and we're going to try to offset the expense of cutting taxes, and I think they actually pay for themselves. But we're going to get this package out the door as soon as we can. People back home need it. It's just not about South Carolina, North Carolina. This disaster package includes 3 disasters that affects Virginia and Florida. So this is a must-do. We're urging the body to have, a clean CR, right, with this package, and let's go home and come back next year and hit the ground running.
Sorry. So you had a deal between the leaders that included disaster relief. That was on a glide path to becoming law. Was it the right decision by Trump to come in here and blow this up and demand the debt limit on top of it?
Well, you know, I wonder whether or not we really even had a deal, because having been Speaker of the House before, the minute you got the votes, you take the vote. And so I believe that Speaker Johnson was doing the best he could to get support for it. But I'm not really sure that this is people reversing their decision. I think they made certain assumptions, and when they got further into the details of the bill, they just pulled back. And President Trump's right. If you look at a lot of the things that are in this bill, President Trump and others are right to criticize it. I'm happy with the clean CR and the disaster supplemental. Some of the provisions in the bill would have been fine by me, but we're not there anymore. Now where we are is the need to stay here until we deliver on desperately needed support in North Carolina and parts south.
What about raising the debt limit on top of that? Was that a good idea for him to demand that?
Well, I think President Trump and I are in agreement that I don't even know why we continue to have the debt limit drama. The debt limit was implemented, as I recall, in 1917. It was we had $3 billion in debt then. We had about $60 billion in GDP. In 2024, the debt limit, our debt right now is $36 trillion. So in its 107-year history, it hasn't really done a very good job of bending the curve, and I think that that's what President Trump is saying. Whether or not the Democrats would accept it in this package, I doubt. But that's a part of the negotiation in the Four Corners that hopefully reaches a positive conclusion that includes disaster recovery.
But I just want to be clear to all of you, is raising or eliminating the debt limit something that you support, and is tackling the debt limit worth risking this kind of aid?
I won't speak for either of my colleagues here, but I'm less interested in that discussion and more interested in how we get disaster recovery done. I've made my point. I'm with President Trump. I do think that the debt limit is this fake sort of a deadline that we've never allowed to lapse. 107 years, we've never defaulted on the debt. The only thing we have done is continue to increase the debt. So I agree with President Trump. At some point, we should probably not make it the fake crisis that it is, which results in increased mandatory spending. But that's separate from the matter at hand. What I'm here to talk about is the need to fund the government, the need to fund disaster recovery, and the need to stay here until we do.
But he's saying it's not separate. He's saying for him that's a must-do.
President Trump.
Yes.
Well, Yeah, the bottom line is that's a negotiating posture that you go into a room and you have to convince 2 out of 4 people in that room who are Democrats who may have a different view.
Well, you got to get 60 votes in the Senate, right? I voted to raise the debt limit. I voted against raising the debt limit. I don't want to default. There are some Republicans who've never voted to raise the debt limit and never will. So that's just a reality. So you have to get Democrats where you lose Republicans. Are they 60 votes in the United States Senate to raise the debt limit as part of this package? I will do that. So you need 59 more.
All right. 58, yes.
I want to go to the future for a minute. If the government shuts down, can disaster relief continue with federal workers that are there on the ground right now?
That's a great question. I have to take it back for the record. You know, we have essential personnel, but that's a very good point. I'm looking at my staff. Do you just not know or going to check into it? Don't know? Put them on the spot. Can you shift all the cameras back there? I'm just kidding. We'll get back to you. I'm assuming just logically that it would not put things down, but that is something for us to look at.
Senator Tillis, Mike Rounds is suggesting maybe bridge disaster relief to take you 3 months or 2 months into next year, and that you could do the rest of the disaster relief as part of the broader negotiations next year. What do you think of that idea? And secondly, what do you think is the minimum amount of disaster relief you need in this package right now?
We need disaster relief in the tens of billions of dollars. Ladies and gentlemen, the more than $100 billion that were in the agreement are insufficient for all of the damage of Helene, Milton, Debbie, and other storms. We have to keep in mind agriculture relief, et cetera. So, no, I want now. The problem that I really have with this process is I hope we don't get to a point to where we politicize disaster relief. I have voted for every disaster relief, whether it was in my state or not, since the beginning of my tenure here in the Senate. And we've also never played the game of having an offset. Disaster relief is something that we get to people in their times of need. And there are thousands, tens of thousands of people who are desperate right now. I'm happy to have a discussion about bending the curve. In fact, I'm happy to have that discussion with anybody who's voting for the Social Security bill that's going to raid the trust fund of $200 billion over the next 10 years. Happy to have that discussion about that kind of spending. But when you're in the middle of a crisis, I don't think anybody's going to want to hear somebody come to the floor and talk about the fiscal responsibility of giving these people a home again, or giving them an opportunity to open up a business again and employ people. So no, I don't think 10 billion or 20 billion, and I promise we'll do something more in March, is an acceptable solution. We know what the need is today. It was negotiated in a package, and it needs to be in a package to get my support to get out of here.
What in particular do you want to remove from this package, given all the discussion about how it's too big?
I think that's a question to ask the House. Look, ball control, and my colleagues can jump in on this. I want to get back to disaster recovery, so I'll give you all a little leeway, but I want to talk about why I'm here today. At the end of the day, it's a four corners discussion that ultimately has to satisfy enough members in the House to send it to us. I don't know if there's any scenario, Lindsay, you've been around here a heck of a lot longer than me. I don't see where there's any scenario where it would be useful for us to pass something to the House and hope that they pass it unless we have pre-conferenced it with them. So right now, those are great questions for the four corners and the members of the House who have to vote for something.
And can I just make a political observation? I think we have a one-seat majority.
Yeah.
I think. It depends on what time of day it is. I doubt if you're going to get all Republicans voting for the bill. So the Speaker and the four corners and everybody else is going to have to get some Democrats to vote for the bill. When it gets over here, you need 60 of us. So the idea that you can write a bill that doesn't have to get some bipartisan support ignores the situation on the ground. We have to have Democrats and Republicans at the 60 level to get anything through the Senate. I am convinced Mike Johnson cannot get every Republican to vote for a package, and he's going to have to some way find Democrats. Here's what I would think that almost all of us agree on. Disaster relief is needed. It's needed now, and that is a unifying point.
You guys, back in October, were talking about possibly bringing Congress back into session to vote on disaster relief. I think the former president even called for that. At this point, why don't you just push for a disaster relief bill to get a vote on it by itself?
The goal is to get disaster relief in whatever form that comes, and in a significant way for North Carolina. We've seen tens of billions of dollars. The request from the state was north of $53 billion. And remember, the $100 billion in the prior bill, which is stalled, was for multiple states. So whatever form that comes in, I would be supportive of that, assuming it includes North Carolina.
Senators, yeah. Two questions. One, I just want to make sure I'm understanding right. You all are saying you will filibuster a funding bill that does not have disaster relief in it, because I heard that from
I was speaking for myself, yeah.
Okay, but you see you nodding also, Senator Graham. Okay, all right, gotcha. Good. Good South Carolina speaking tradition. The other question is, in the end, there was a deal, at least as far as reporters are concerned, because all four corners did post this bill. Speaker Johnson held a background call with reporters about the deal. So can you talk to the American people about why it is that this fell apart? It was Republicans, President Trump, and Republicans in the House that led to this collapse. How do you explain that to Americans?
You know, I'm not going to get into the heads of the folks that were trying to get votes on the House side, but I suspect it goes like several pieces of legislation I laid down when I was Speaker of the House in North Carolina. You make certain assumptions about people voting. You can't get to necessarily every member and make sure they've read every page and they're okay with everything. So I think that Speaker Johnson did what any speaker would do in that setting, is try to say it's directionally correct. I think I can win the votes, and with the president's help, I could do it. And in this case, we saw some expression of concern with the package, and so that I don't believe that Speaker Johnson had the cover to secure the votes. That's why we are where we are. I mean, it's not like it's lost on me or any of you all that we had other people criticize the deal that had been posted. That's how I think it happened. So I do believe that Speaker Johnson thought he was going to be able to secure support, and that didn't occur for any number of reasons.
Well, thanks, Senator. Looking ahead to the coming months, one of the reasons this unraveled was because of a last-minute demand from the president-elect. There's a lot that you're all trying to accomplish in the next year, whether it's disaster relief or something else. What's your advice to him and his team when it comes to engaging in the practice of legislative negotiations effectively and not ineffectively?
I'm going to defer to an incoming chair and the senior member of the Carolinas delegation.
I think it probably collapsed of its own weight. You know, put yourself in Mike Johnson's shoes. That's a hard job on a good day. You're trying to put a package together, keep the government running. You got different interests with worthy causes, by the way. So the knock on the bill is it got too big, it got pork-laden. I've never heard anybody suggest that the disaster component was pork-laden. I've heard people say it should be paid for, but we've never done that before. This is truly an emergency. So those elements of the bill that were considered pork will probably fall by the wayside. But here's what I will tell people who want to figure out what's going to happen. If you can do this without a Democratic vote, that would be a miracle. You can't. So this is the world in which the Founding Fathers gave us. They gave us a world of checks and balances. They gave us a House that's up for every 2 years and sends up for every 6 years. The Senate traditionally has empowered the minority voices in the Senate for big decisions. That's changed some, but we need 60 votes to get it done in the Senate. Mike Johnson's going to have to pick up a handful at least of Democrats, because there are some Republicans who will never vote for anything. That's what I would suggest to people. President Trump was upset by the size and scope of the package. He was president for 4 years. He actually negotiated pretty damn well, I thought, with Democrats to get positive outcomes. He'll be here in January the 20th. But between now and January the 20th, the people of South Carolina and North Carolina are living miserable lives, and they need some help. We're not leaving town until they get the help.
Yeah, well, and because this gentleman was one of the first people.
All right, you have been listening to Senators Lindsey Graham and Tom Tillis, both from the Carolinas, on the potential government shutdown and the need for disaster relief. To bring you up to speed on where we are right now, President Trump and his allies decided last night to kill the bipartisan spending bill in the House, saying it had too much pork. In other words, it had too much wasteful spending. That resolution that died did have disaster relief, $100 billion in there. $10 billion was earmarked for the state of Florida. You heard the senators there talking about the need, the absolute need. They say they will filibuster if they need to, and because they want to avoid a government shutdown, but they also need disaster assistance for so many people who continue to struggle from those two storms. By the way, they have until tomorrow at midnight to reach a deal, or the impacts from a government shutdown will start to roll out. And we have been constantly updating our coverage on clickorlando.com on this. We will see you back at 4 o'clock for more reaction.
This has been a News 6 breaking news alert. For continuing coverage of this developing story, go to